Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Well, I mean, your specialism is labour relations. Labour relations don't seem to be very good indeed between this government and a lot of the unions. Now, some are known to be more militant than the others, RMT and the like, quite happy to go out on strike at the drop of a hat. Royal College of Nursing going out on strike tomorrow as things stand. You know, first strike in their history, in the NHS's history. So perhaps a lot more people more sympathetic to that. But do you detect that there is A, room for some negotiation on the rail strike industry, and B, any willingness on either side to do that?
Well, look, there was a new offer that was put forward by the government, but the offer wasn't much different from the offer that was put forward 4 or 5 months ago. They were like, oh, there's 9%. That 9% is over the next 2 years, with last year being a freeze. Yeah. And that's not different from the 8%, which is 4 and 4. So over 3 years, I mean, it's really it's not much of an offer, and there hasn't been much movement on what they call modernization either, because they're saying, oh, you have to introduce all these measures that make it more easy for us to like hire short-term contracts, etc. So I don't really see that much movement publicly, but maybe privately it might be different.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And there's certainly been a change in the sort of mode of conversation between Mark Harper and the unions as the new Transport Secretary compared with Grant Shapps. And it's very much more sort of in sorrow rather than anger, isn't it? Much less belligerent. But again, is the sticking point going to be about the money? We're always told it's never just about the money, aren't we? But it's not just about that. It is also about working practices as well, some were called Spanish practices. The idea that our railways are run on a sort of oh, would you mind awfully working on a Sunday occasionally? Please, pretty please, double time basis. You want to work on the railways. I'm afraid there's going to be some weekend working. Yeah, there might have to be some early hours and night shift working. That's how it works. Now, a lot of people are moving on to those sort of shifts. The railway unions have been strong enough to resist a lot of that, but that is holding the railways back. I mean, do you think it's going to be about those sort of issues rather than pay, or do you think it's going to combine as the two, and they'll take a lower pay offer in return for not changing working practices?
Look, I think it's both. And I think that the reason why the government hasn't conceded, they would concede on pay. The reason why they want to not really concede on that is because they want to erode the possibility of workers really gaining more power. And they have an incredible amount of power. We see in Felixstowe that they went on strike and won this massive pay increase just yesterday. You see like rail workers have this kind of what you call a critical choke point in the economy. And by eroding those workplace practices, Julia, to be fair, that was a little bit of a caricature. It's not like, pretty please, can you work on this day?
That is, it's done on overtime. No, we run our railways at the weekend on overtime.
Yeah, it is overtime.
Well, yeah, that's a pretty please then, isn't it?
That's not pretty please. It's that that's not modernization. That's taking us back to the 20th or turn of the 20th century or the Victorian era, where it's like, oh, you have to come in when we ask, and we don't pay you any extra. Stable workplace practices are a mechanism that comes with the introduction of Fordism.
No, but it's like someone saying, I want to go and be I'm going to work as a nurse, but I never want to work a weekend. I worked on a Sunday paper for years. Yeah, I had to work every Friday night and every Saturday for 7 years. That's part of the deal. I mean, it's this idea that you can go and do a job, but that involves a 24-hour or at least a 7-day-a-week service, but you don't want to work over some of those hours. I can understand you want it. There's ways of doing it where people don't work all of them. I mean, absolutely. But there are ways of doing this, and people wanting a family life. But this idea that you run the railways based on goodwill as opposed to, sorry, people need to work the shifts to run the rairailways.
This is a ridiculous caricature. It's not just that. It is. It's not just that they want to put people on short-term contracts that they can bring in and erode and hollow out their conditions. There are good, stable jobs on the rail lines.
Absolutely there are.
And they want to make it what they call modernization. They want to make it as precarious and as hollowed out as the rest of the labor market is. And what the RMT is saying is, no, we don't want that to happen. And so there's an ideological position by the government to say, we want this to happen so that we can increase profits. You saw over 3 years, £500 million go to shareholders. The reason why they want to casualize the workplace is because they can increase profits. And so the antagonism is clear. Yeah. You're either standing with the profiteers who don't do anything and just invest and were born into money probably, or the workers who wake up at the crack of dawn and actually run the railways. There's a clear division. The question is, Julia, which side are you on? I think it's
do you know whose side I'm on? I'm on the side of people who try to get to work.
Yeah, and so
trying to see their families at Christmas. That's whose side I'm on.
Fares have increased 39%.
I think for most people, the plague on both their houses.
Fares have increased 39% over 10 years, and that hasn't gone to the workers. That's gone to shareholders. So if you stand with the public, you also should stand with the union that's trying to prevent them from.
I'm sorry. I mean, with all due respect, I think they've got some perfectly good arguments to make in terms of what the RMT does to protect their members, and that's their job, that's their interest. But I'm sorry, the idea that the RMT's chief concern is safety on the railways and the taxpayer and the consumer is, frankly, I mean, pie in the sky.
I haven't made that argument, and also the safety on the rail lines is actually having security staff funded. Yes, the RMT's interest is ensuring that their workers aren't fired and aren't reduced.
Ashok, I'm going to have to leave it there, but only because we're out of time.